Today I'm making a simple warp coil that I can use on my PVC pipe loom in order to use it more easily as a bead loom. In the picture now you see a 1/4 inch size dowel, and this is my Ojibwe bead loom, and it's a great loom. I use it for a lot, but I want to do a bigger tapestry, and I have a PVC pipe loom right here that I use for my sumac knot weaving. I have to back up, please excuse the clutter. And this loom is a wonderful loom. I used to have a big Navajo loom, but it was very difficult to move it around. It wasn't as portable as I like it. So I had 2 of these PVC pipe looms, and this one happened to be used by my niece and nephews, and they returned it to me. So now I'm using it, and I'm using it for sumac knots. But as you can see on this loom, what I've done is wrapped simple copper wire around a dowel, and I have it spread out a little bit so that I can use it as a warp coil for this warp, which is Navajo Churro wool warp. But all I have to do is scrunch it together so it's tighter, and it's a warp coil that is going to make it much easier to warp this type of a loom, or really any loom, with thread for a bead tapestry. The PVC pipe loom, the design and directions for how to build one is in this book called Kids Weaving by Sarah Swett, and it's a wonderful resource book, not only for kids. You can see a picture of the loom right here. This is a great loom. I can use this almost the same way I used my Navajo loom. These are Velcro straps that were like $5 to buy 2 of them, and this is a cloth bar, and that's the bottom bar of the frame of the loom, and I can keep this at a very tight tension, tight enough for Navajo type weaving, also tight enough for bead weaving. When I ran into a problem, it was because when I was warping a bead tapestry I was using cotton quilting thread for the thread warp, I didn't have this warp coil, and as you can see, the warp will slip on this plastic, well, PVC cloth bar. So it became very frustrating. I got to 70 thread warps, and when I went to line them up, it became very messy because everything was too slippery. So what I'm going to do is, I know that going by my Ojibwe loom and how far apart the different slots are for a warp thread, I know that if I do 72 wraps around this dowel, I will end up with about 5.5 to 6 inches of copper wire, and that will allow me to use seed beads, size 11 seed beads or size 8 pony beads, to get a 5-inch wide tapestry, bead tapestry. It will also not only make it easier to warp any type of loom. The pipe loom has a warp bar on it. This is the warp bar, and it also has a heddle bar. Really, it's a great loom. When you warp a long warp, you use a warp bar. And so what I did was just attach my warp coil to the warp bar. And for a bead tapestry, if I squish this together, as long as I can get a thread through each slot in the coil here, it'll keep my warp straight. And the first couple of rows of beads, which are always a little bit difficult, especially if you use the heddle method, where you would have 2 warp threads in each slot, it's difficult to get the beads to line up the first couple of rows. This warp coil will make it very much easier. So I am going to wrap the copper wire, inexpensive copper wire. You can use aluminum wire, anything that's inexpensive. This was wire left over from my bonsai plants. I had it in the house. I'm going to wrap 72 times around a 1/4 inch diameter dowel. Okay, that's 24 times wrapping around it, and I want to show you something. I am wrapping at an angle, a slight angle all the way down, and then what I did was scrunch this together. And as you can see, they're a little bit uneven, but the first one I did came out more even, and it was very tight. That little bit of unevenness is actually going to make it easier to put a thread in each slot. Okay, that's 75 times. I did 3 extra because the first warp coil I made has 75 slots on it, and it'll be easier for me to remember if they're both the same. You just need simple wire cutters to cut the wire off of there, about an inch from there. And then what I'm going to do, what I said about them being uneven is still true. There are a couple that are too close together. So I'm going to either use pliers, depending on the type of wire you're using. I have needle nose pliers I can shape them with, or regular pliers you can use if you want to make them more evenly round. I'm going to scrunch it together, and it will be about 5.5 to 6 inches wide, which will give me the warp coil that I need for a 5-inch wide bead tapestry. And this can be used on any loom that you can use a warp bar. I could also, well, the Ojibwe loom doesn't really need obviously a warp bar because it has the slots in the wood piece. But if you had a loom like this and you wanted to mount it, you could put a piece of warp at the far left of the coil and a piece of warp at the far right of the coil and string it on your loom, and then go back and fill in the warp, and then it will be held in place. So I can't think of too many looms you couldn't use this on in some way. Okay, I've shaped it just a little bit. I have each coil, if the camera will focus a little bit better, each wrap is about a 1/16 of an inch apart from the next one. And you can see I can still shape it a little bit better if I want to. But I have the space to put a thread in each slot, which will make the warping an awful lot easier. I'm leaving it on the dowel because what I can do is just take that dowel and place it right onto a warp bar on a loom. The other one came out much more uniform, but I actually had to go back and pull the coils apart a little bit more because they were very tight together. And this is just about, it's 5 3/4 inches to the end of the coils. And this will make it much easier for me to warp my PVC pipe loom for bead tapestry.